The diagnosis landed with the sterile finality of a dropped scalpel in the quiet and mint-green examination room. Stage 2, invasive ductal carcinoma, Dr. Chen stated, her gaze kind but direct behind practical glasses. The margins look clear from the biopsy, Eleanor, and we've caught it relatively early. With surgery followed by radiation, the prognosis is generally very favorable. Eleanor Ellie. Davies nodded numbly, the medical terms washing over her like a foreign language. Cancer. Breast cancer. At 49, after 15 years navigating the demanding social currents of Philadelphia's main line as the supportive wife of renowned architect Richard Davies, the word felt alien, intrusive, a starkly unwelcome reality crashing into her carefully curated life. She asked the requisite questions about treatment protocols, survival rates, surgical options, her voice sounding distant, detached, as if discussing someone else entirely. Her mind, usually sharp and organized from her years running major fundraising campaigns for the city's art museum before Richard's career took precedence, struggled to process the enormity of it. Driving home along the familiar tree-lined lanes of Bryn Mawr, the diagnosis sat beside her in the passenger seat, like a heavy, unwelcome guest. The late afternoon sun dappled through the turning leaves, painting the manicured lawns in hues of gold and crimson, a beautiful facade masking the fear coiling in her stomach. How would she tell Richard? He didn't handle illness well, neither his own minor ailments nor anyone else's. He preferred life to run smoothly, predictably, like one of his meticulously designed building projects. Cancer was messy, inconvenient, unpredictable. It didn't fit the narrative of their successful, enviable life. She rehearsed the conversation in her head, opting for calm rationality, the approach Richard favored. After dinner, she decided. Present the facts, the treatment plan, the positive prognosis. Reassure him it's manageable. She needed his support, his partnership, now more than ever. 15 years of marriage, of prioritizing his ambitions, managing his social calendar, hosting his clients, running their elegant home. Surely that counted for something. Surely, faced with this, he would step up, be the partner she needed him to be. She pulled into the sweeping driveway of their stone colonial, the house immaculate, impressive, and lately feeling increasingly hollow. Inside, the familiar scent of lemon oil and quiet, bespoke luxury greeted her. Richard's briefcase was on the hall table, but the house was silent. She found him in his sleek home office, a space dedicated to his architectural firm, Davies Design Group. He was hunched over large blueprints spread across a drafting table, phone pressed to his ear, deep in an animated discussion about material specifications for the Atherton Tower, his latest high-profile luxury condominium project. He glanced up as Ellie entered, offered a brief, dismissive wave, and immediately turned back to his call, gesturing impatiently for quiet. Ellie stood in the doorway for a moment, the weight of her diagnosis pressing down, suddenly feeling like an intruder in her own home, secondary even here to the demands of his work. She retreated quietly, the unspoken message clear. Not now. Later, after his call finally ended, she found him in the library, pouring himself a generous measure of single malt scotch. The setting sun cast long shadows across the leather-bound books he rarely read, but which looked impressive on the shelves. "Richard?" she began hesitantly, pausing in the doorway. "Do you have a few minutes? There's something important I need to talk to you about." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, frowning at his watch. "Ellie, can it possibly wait?" "I'm absolutely swamped trying to finalize the Atherton presentation for tomorrow morning, and don't forget the Children's Hospital Gala tonight. The mayor will be there. It's critical we make a good showing." He took a sip of scotch, finally looking at her, but his gaze was appraising, critical. "Are you ready?" "You should wear the navy Carolina Herrera. It photographs better than the gray one. And try to look engaged tonight. You seemed rather distracted at the Hendersons' dinner last week." The casual dismissal, the complete lack of curiosity about what might be important to her, the immediate pivot to her appearance and social duties. It struck Ellie with the force of a physical blow. Her life-altering diagnosis, the fear churning inside her, was nothing more than an inconvenient interruption before a client presentation and a fundraising gala. He hadn't asked what was wrong. He hadn't noticed her pallor, the strain around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. He saw only his own needs, his own schedule, his own reflection in the mirror of their shared social standing. In that moment, the vast, aching distance that had been subtly growing between them for years became starkly, undeniably apparent. She saw him not as her partner, but as a demanding, self-absorbed entity orbiting his own success, with her relegated to the roles of a supportive decorative satellite. Sharing her fear, her vulnerability, her diagnosis with this man felt suddenly impossible, pointless. It would become another inconvenience for him to manage, another demand on his precious time, perhaps even elicit impatience rather than empathy. The decision formed instantly, solidifying out of hurt and a sudden chilling self-preservation. She wouldn't tell him. Not now. Not like this. "You're right," Ellie said, forcing a calm, neutral tone smoothing down the fabric of her slacks. "It can wait. Just wanted to confirm arrangements for the car service tonight. I'll go get ready now." Richard nodded, already turning back to his blueprints, dismissing her from his thoughts as easily as he dismissed her concerns. "Good. 7 o'clock sharp." Ellie retreated upstairs to their cavernous, beautifully appointed master suite, where they hadn't actually shared a bed in months, citing his late work nights and her supposed need for undisturbed sleep. She sank onto the edge of the antique chaise lounge, the diagnosis a cold, heavy stone in her chest. The profound sense of isolation was staggering. She was facing the biggest battle of her life, utterly alone within the gilded cage of her perfect mainline marriage. The weight of her secret, combined with the stark confirmation of Richard's emotional abandonment, felt almost as terrifying as the cancer itself. The weeks following the diagnosis passed in a surreal haze for Ellie. She moved through the motions of scheduling initial consultations, undergoing further scans, discussing surgical options with Dr. Chen and a recommended breast surgeon, all while maintaining a facade of normalcy at home. She told only her sister Megan Sharma, sworn to secrecy, needing at least one confidant in her terrifying new reality. Richard remained utterly oblivious, consumed by the demands of his architectural firm, and Ellie suspected, with a growing, sickening certainty, by his burgeoning relationship with his young assistant, Chloe Miller. His late nights became later, his weekend site visits more frequent. He was often distracted, irritable, his phone guarded more closely than ever. The emotional chasm between them widened into an unbridgeable gulf. Ellie, navigating the terrifying landscape of her diagnosis mostly alone, felt a profound sense of isolation deepen with each passing day. The inevitable confrontation occurred not in a public restaurant, but with brutal intimacy within the four walls of their impeccably decorated mainline home. It was a Tuesday evening, nearly 3 weeks after her diagnosis. Ellie had attempted once again to initiate a serious conversation after a tense, mostly silent dinner. "Richard," she began tentatively as he poured himself a second, large glass of wine in the living room, "we really need to talk. There's something important." He cut her off, turning from the wet bar, his expression cold, resolute. "You're right, Ellie. We do need to talk." He took a deliberate sip of wine, avoiding her eyes. Us, it isn't working anymore. Hasn't been for a long time, if we're both being honest with ourselves." He gestured vaguely around the perfect room. "We have grown apart. We want different things. I need—" He paused, finally meeting her gaze, his eyes clinical, devoid of warmth. "Space." Ellie felt the floor drop out from beneath her. Space. The coward's euphemism. "After 15 years, Richard?" she whispered, the words barely audible over the sudden pounding in her ears. "Just like that? Space?" The urge to scream, to throw her diagnosis at him like a weapon, rose violently, but she choked it back. Looking at his closed-off expression, she knew instantly it would be futile, perhaps even perceived as a desperate, manipulative ploy. "It's better this way, Ellie," he continued, launching into what sounded like a rehearsed speech, full of corporate-sounding platitudes about divergent paths and mutual respect for individual growth. "A clean break now, while we can still be amicable." The word hung, ugly and false, between them. "Is there someone else?" The question escaped her lips before she could stop it, blunt and raw. He hesitated for only a fraction of a second, but it was enough. That slight flicker in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw. "Yes," he admitted finally, his gaze sliding away towards the window. "It's Chloe Miller, from the firm." His young, ambitious designer assistant. It wasn't planned, Ellie. Truly, these things just happen. Just happen. As if 15 years of marriage, shared history, vows made, could be casually erased by an office affair that just happened. As if her own terrifying health crisis, the secret she carried like a lead weight, was less significant than his midlife cliché. "I want a divorce, Ellie," he concluded, his voice regaining its firm, decisive tone now that the confession was out. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it on the polished surface of the coffee table. "That's Bill Henderson, top divorce attorney in the city. He'll be in touch with the paperwork. I've already found a temporary apartment downtown. I'll move out this weekend." Ellie stared at the card, and then at Richard's impassive face. Numbness enveloped her. She couldn't even summon anger yet, just a vast, echoing emptiness. Later that week, before the official divorce papers arrived, Ellie found the concrete proof that obliterated any lingering shred of doubt, any misplaced sentimentality. Richard, rushing off to a client dinner, likely with Chloe, had carelessly left his personal iPad on the charger in their home office. A notification pinged. A text message preview flashed briefly on the lock screen from Chloe M containing a kiss emoji and something about celebrating soon. Driven by a cold need for certainty, Ellie unlocked it. His passcode, embarrassingly, was still their anniversary date. She found months, perhaps longer, of intimate messages, photos from supposed business trips that were clearly romantic getaways, a beachfront resort, receipt from a weekend he claimed to be at a conference, and explicit discussions about their future together after Richard handled the situation with Ellie. The calculated deception, the sheer length and depth of the betrayal laid bare on the screen, didn't make her cry. It forged the numbness into something hard and sharp. Resolve. The thick envelope from Henderson and Associates arrived via courier the following Monday as promised. The proposed settlement was exactly what she expected, coldly efficient, legally standard. Sell the house, split the proceeds 50-50 after realtor fees. Divide retirement accounts accrued during the marriage according to a standard formula. Personal property to be divided equitably. Though Richard had already taken the liberty of mentally earmarking most valuable items, including artwork Ellie had brought into the marriage. It was designed for a swift, uncomplicated dissolution, assuming her quiet compliance. Ellie looked at the signature line. Her sister Megan's voice echoed in her head. "Fight him, Ellie! Take him for everything!" Her own lawyer would undoubtedly advise the same. But another voice, quieter, colder, more strategic, whispered a different counsel. It was the memory of her father-in-law, Arthur Vance. Instead of calling a divorce attorney, Ellie picked up the phone and dialed Arthur's private number. "Arthur," she said, keeping her voice remarkably steady when he answered warmly. "It's Ellie. I have some difficult news. Richard. Richard asked for a divorce. He's leaving me for someone at his firm." There was a heavy pause, then Arthur's voice, tight with controlled fury. "That goddamn fool," he growled. "I feared this might happen. Ellie, my dear girl, I am so sorry." He insisted they meet for their regular Thursday lunch, moving it from their usual public cafe to a quiet, private room at his venerable old Philly club. Arthur listened intently as Ellie recounted Richard's cold dismissal, omitting only her cancer diagnosis for the moment. That felt too raw, too private to share just yet, even with him. Arthur's anger simmered visibly. "Arrogant, just like his mother," he muttered. "Thinks the world owes him everything, discards loyalty like last year's fashion." He patted Ellie's hand, his expression fierce with protective loyalty towards her. "Don't you worry about a thing financially, Eleanor. You will be taken care of. But," he leaned forward, his eyes sharp and shrewd, "there's something more. Something Richard in his infinite arrogance knows nothing about." He then proceeded to explain the moral clauses he had instructed his estate lawyers to insert into his will 6 years prior, shortly after his own wife's passing, having observed Richard's escalating self-absorption and casual disregard for Ellie even then. "It's quite simple, legally airtight," Arthur explained. "If Richard initiates divorce proceedings against you, his legal wife of 15 years at the time, without legally verifiable cause, specifically clear evidence of infidelity or abandonment by you, he forfeits his entire inheritance. Everything." Arthur listed the assets: the controlling interest in Vance Industries, the manufacturing empire Arthur built, the sprawling Pocono Lake House compound, the multimillion-dollar family trust funds. It all bypasses him entirely, goes directly to the Vance Family Charitable Foundation instead. "Does Richard know?" Ellie whispered, stunned. Arthur gave a grim smile. "He received a copy of the full will years ago, as required. But Richard? Read 100 pages of dense legalese when he assumed he was the sole heir anyway? Never happened. He probably glanced at the first page and filed it away. He remains blissfully ignorant." Arthur then gave Ellie a sealed, notarized copy of the relevant clause and codicil, along with the direct contact information for his senior estate attorney. "My advice, Ellie?" Arthur said quietly, his gaze steady. "Don't fight Richard on this divorce now. Don't contest his standard settlement offer. Sign the papers he sent. Let him finalize it quickly, cleanly. Let him think he's gotten away with it, free and clear to start his new life with her." He paused. Give him time to get comfortable. Let him make plans based on the inheritance he believes is coming to him. Then when the moment is right, perhaps during his engagement party at the lake house he thinks will soon be his, you present this. He tapped the envelope containing the will clause. Let him discover the true cost of his choices. Ellie left the lunch in a daze, Arthur's words echoing in her mind, the notarized document heavy in her purse. The grief was still a raw wound. The fear of her cancer battle loomed large, but intertwined with it now was something else entirely. A cold, clear path forward. A path towards not just survival, but justice. Arthur hadn't just offered support. He had handed her a weapon, forged years ago by his own foresight and loyalty. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. Richard thought he was initiating an ending. He had no idea he was merely setting the stage for his own spectacular downfall. Acting with a speed that belied her internal turmoil and fortified by the knowledge of Richard's infidelity and Arthur Vance's secret contingency, Ellie signed the divorce papers Richard's lawyer had sent. She didn't contest the standard, seemingly equitable division of assets outlined. She didn't demand alimony. She simply signed, had her signature witnessed by her sister Megan, and sent the package back via overnight courier the very next day. Let Richard have his quick, uncomplicated dissolution. Let him believe she was too devastated, too weak, or too intimidated to fight. Let him finalize the divorce swiftly, thereby unknowingly triggering the very clause in Arthur's will that would invalidate his claim to the Vance fortune. Her quiet compliance was, in itself, a strategic move. With the legal ties formally dissolving, Ellie turned her entire focus inward, towards the immediate, terrifying battle for her health. The weeks following the divorce finalization were consumed by the unglamorous, grueling reality of cancer treatment. There was the lumpectomy surgery, the antiseptic smell of the hospital, the post-operative pain, the vulnerability of relying on others. Then came the relentless routine of radiation therapy, daily treks to the oncology center at Penn Medicine, the cold precision of the linear accelerator, the growing fatigue that settled deep in her bones, the angry red burn developing on her skin. Through it all, her support system, though small, was unwavering. Her sister, Megan Sharma, became her rock, rearranging her own busy schedule to drive Ellie to countless appointments, sitting quietly beside her during infusions, bringing over comforting meals, and offering uncomplicated sisterly companionship without judgment or pity. Their neighbor, David Miller, the quiet widower Richard had always cultivated more as a useful connection than a true friend, proved unexpectedly kind, checking in regularly, leaving groceries on her porch, offering to walk her dog, a golden retriever named Max she got years ago. And then there was Arthur Vance. Her formidable father-in-law called her every few days, his gruff voice offering surprisingly gentle encouragement. "Fighting spirit, Eleanor." He'd rumble through the phone line, deliberately using her preferred name now, pointedly omitting the Davies. "You inherited your mother's grit. Show this damn illness what you're made of. Richard!" Richard was a fool of the highest order to walk away from that strength. His unwavering belief in her, even as his own son had discarded her, became an unexpected source of fortitude. Their bond deepened, forged in shared disappointment over Richard and mutual respect. During the long weeks of radiation recovery, when fatigue often confined her to her quiet mainline house, the house she knew she would eventually have to leave, but hadn't the energy to deal with yet, Ellie had ample time to think. The shock and grief began to recede, replaced by a quiet introspection. Who was she, really, without the demanding role of Mrs. Richard Davies? What had happened to Eleanor Jenkins, the sharp, passionate development director who had tripled the endowment for the Philadelphia Arts Collective before sacrificing her career trajectory for Richards? On impulse, one quiet afternoon, she reached out to her old mentor Eleanor Sterling, the formidable, now semi-retired grande dame of the city's non-profit arts scene. They met for tea at the Rittenhouse, Mrs. Sterling's shrewd eyes missing nothing behind her elegant spectacles. "So, Mrs. Distinda." Sterling began without preamble after Ellie briefly outlined the divorce, omitting the cancer details for now. The brilliant Richard Davies finally revealed himself to be a predictable cad. "Left you for his assistant, I presume." Ellie nodded, confirming it was Chloe Miller, the young designer. Mrs. Sterling sniffed dismissively. "Happens every time." Men of a certain age and ego. Utterly tedious. She leaned forward. The real question, Eleanor, is what you are going to do now. Don't tell me you plan to simply fade into mainline widowhood, attending charity luncheons. The conversation sparked something within Ellie, a flicker of her former self. Mrs. Sterling reminded her of her strategic mind, her fundraising prowess, her deep knowledge of the arts world. You are one of the best, Ellie, she stated firmly. Don't let that man's betrayal convince you otherwise. That talent is still in there. Before they parted, Mrs. Sterling pressed her card into Ellie's hand. When you're ready to re-engage, call me. I have ideas. That conversation was a catalyst. Ellie realized how much of her own identity she had allowed to atrophy during her marriage, sublimating her ambitions to Richard's. That afternoon, she began the legal process of restoring her maiden name. Shedding Davies felt like shedding a heavy, ill-fitting costume. Eleanor Jenkins, she repeated to herself, testing the sound. It felt right. Stronger. Meanwhile, news of Richard's new life inevitably trickled back. The divorce had been finalized with astonishing speed, thanks to Ellie's lack of contest. He and Chloe Miller were now a public couple, appearing at gallery openings and society events, Chloe often draped in new designer clothes. David Miller mentioned, with some awkwardness, seeing them overseeing extensive modern renovations at the mainline house, clearly erasing Ellie's more traditional taste, staking their claim. The speed, the lack of sentimentality, was like salt in a wound, but it also perversely fueled Ellie's resolve. He was building his new life on the assumption of inheriting the Vance fortune, an assumption built on sand. Then, roughly 4 months after the divorce was finalized, just as Ellie was completing her final draining week of radiation therapy, the announcement appeared prominently in the Philadelphia Inquirer Society pages, accompanied by a professionally shot photo. Dr. Richard Davies, principal of Davies Design Group, is pleased to announce his engagement to Miss Chloe Miller. An engagement celebration for her family and friends will be held in 3 weeks' time at Lakeside Manor, the Vance family's private estate in the Pocono Mountains. The photo showed Chloe beaming, flashing a large, ostentatious diamond ring, one Ellie vaguely recognized as having belonged to Richard's paternal grandmother. Reading the announcement, seeing the picture, Ellie felt not a pang of jealousy, but a surge of cold, hard purpose. The Poconos Lake House, the very heart of the Vancer family legacy, the jewel in the inheritance crown Richard believed was his birthright. He was flaunting his victory, his new life, in the very place his father's will decreed he could never truly possess under these circumstances. The arrogance was breathtaking. The timing for revealing Arthur's secret clause became crystal clear. Ellie made the call to Arthur Vance immediately. "Arthur, it's Ellie Jenkins," she said, testing her reclaimed name. "I assume you saw the engagement announcement? And the location?" Arthur chuckled grimly. "Indeed, the boy has no shame, and it seems no sense of self-preservation." He paused. "Are you ready, my dear?" "Yes, Arthur," Ellie replied, her voice steady. "My final radiation treatment is next week. I'll be ready. Send me the details." She spent the next 3 weeks focusing on her final treatments and recovery, but also on meticulous preparation. She confirmed the party date and time. She retrieved the notarized copy of the will clause from her bank's safe deposit box. Arthur arranged for discreet, reliable transportation and for her to and from the Poconos. Ellie met with Megan, explaining her plan. Her sister was initially shocked, then fiercely supportive. Megan helped her select the perfect outfit. The slate blue dress, elegant, understated, but undeniably powerful. Ellie booked an appointment with her preferred hairstylist for the day of the party. She mentally rehearsed her entrance, her approach, the exact words she would use. She wasn't planning an emotional outburst, she was planning a surgical strike, delivered with the same calm precision she once used to manage multimillion-dollar nonprofit budgets. The woman Richard Davies had discarded was gone. Eleanor Jenkins was preparing for her reckoning. The drive north from Philadelphia towards the Pocono Mountains felt both familiar and surreal. Ellie navigated the rental car along winding roads she hadn't traveled in nearly a year, the landscape shifting from a suburban sprawl to rolling hills ablaze with the vibrant peak of Pennsylvania's autumn foliage. Each curve brought phantom echoes of past journeys with Richard, anniversary weekends, holidays with his parents, summer retreats filled with laughter and lakeside dinners under the stars. Memories now coated with the bitter film of betrayal. But today, she wasn't driving towards shared nostalgia. She was driving towards a necessary reckoning. Her hands were steady on the wheel, her resolve as crisp and clear as the autumn air. Her final radiation treatment was 10 days behind her. The physical fatigue lingered, but it was overshadowed by a steely sense of purpose, forged in the fires of illness and infidelity. As she turned onto the long, private gravel road leading to Lakeside Manor, the Vance family's sprawling lakefront estate, the sounds of celebration reached her even before the house came into view. The sophisticated strains of a live string quartet, bursts of animated laughter, the clink of glasses. The long driveway was already densely lined with expensive vehicles, gleaming BMWs, Mercedes sedans, a few sporty Porsches. Testament to the guest list Richard and Chloe had assembled from Philadelphia's medical, architectural, and social elite. Ellie parked her unobtrusive rental sedan near the entrance of the drive, hidden slightly by a large rhododendron bush. She sat for a moment, observing. White paper lanterns hung from the branches of ancient oaks, swaying gently. Catering staff in crisp black and white uniforms moved efficiently across the expansive lawn and bordering the lake. A large white marquee had been erected near the boathouse, likely shielding a bar or additional seating. The main event seemed centered on the flagstone terrace adjoining the main lodge, where guests mingled, champagne flutes in hand. It was the picture of effortless, old-money elegance, a world Richard had always navigated with entitled ease, a world Ellie had diligently learned to perform within. Taking a deep, centering breath, she checked her reflection one last time in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back was subtly transformed. The strain of treatment was visible if one looked closely, but her eyes held a new clarity. Her recently styled silver-streaked bob framed a face that looked thinner, perhaps, but stronger, resolute. She smoothed down the slate-blue fabric of her dress, elegant, understated, chosen specifically not to scream revenge, but quiet confidence. Her hand rested briefly on her purse lying on the passenger seat, feeling the reassuring stiffness of the sealed, notarized envelope within. Arthur Vance's carefully planted time bomb. It was 4:42 p.m. The party had officially started over an hour ago. Perfect timing. Late enough for all the key players to be present and relaxed, early enough that excessive alcohol wouldn't cloud the impact of her revelation. Stepping out of the car, Ellie began her walk towards the terrace, her low heels making almost no sound on the gravel path. Heads began to turn as she approached the edge of the main gathering. Polite smiles froze, conversations faltered. She saw flickers of recognition, then confusion, then wide-eyed shock ripple through the guests who knew her. Former neighbors, wives of Richard's colleagues, members of the hospital board where she used to volunteer. Someone gasped audibly. Diane Harris, whose husband was a partner at Richard's, now former architectural firm, gaped openly, champagne sloshing unnoticed from her flute. Ellie ignored the stares, the sudden hush that fell over nearby conversations. Her gaze scanned the crowd, coolly seeking her targets, and there they were, holding court near the terrace railing overlooking the sparkling lake. Richard, looking tanned, prosperous, and utterly self-satisfied in a tailored blazer, stood with his arm possessively around Chloe Miller's waist. Chloe beamed up at him, flashing the enormous diamond ring on her left hand, laughing brightly at something Richard was saying to a small group that included his senior partners and their wives. She looked radiant, triumphant, the picture of the young, adored fiancé stepping into a life of privilege. With measured steps, Ellie walked directly towards them. The small cluster surrounding Richard fell silent as she approached, sensing the sudden, inexplicable shift in atmosphere. Richard turned in, annoyance flashing across his face at the interruption, clearly expecting a guest or caterer. Then his eyes registered who it was. His jaw went slack, his face paling beneath the tan. Shock, disbelief, then fury warred in his eyes. Chloe's brilliant smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of hostile confusion. "Eleanor," Richard managed, his voice tight, barely controlled, pitched low but carrying in the sudden, intense quiet that had fallen over their immediate circle. "What in God's name are you doing here? This is a private engagement party." He made a subtle, instinctive move, as if to physically shield Chloe or steer Ellie away from the center of attention. Ellie halted just before him, standing her ground, refusing to be moved or intimidated. She offered a cool, brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, Richard." "Chloe." Her voice was calm, perfectly modulated, yet carrying an unmistakable edge that made nearby guests lean in slightly. "I won't stay long. I just came to offer my sincere congratulations on your engagement." She paused, letting the bitter irony land. "And," she continued smoothly, reaching into her purse and withdrawing the crisp, official-looking envelope, "I wanted to deliver this personally, Consider it an essential piece of paperwork regarding the foundations of your future plans together. She held the envelope out towards Richard. He stared at it as if it were venomous, making no move to take it. Whatever this is, Eleanor, it can wait, he hissed, his eyes darting nervously towards his partners, who were now watching with intense curiosity. This is neither the time nor the place. Oh, but I disagree, Richard, Ellie replied, her voice still light, almost conversational, yet cutting through the tension. This is precisely the time and the place. Because this document, she tapped the envelope, directly pertains to your ability to fund this lovely party, this impressive ring. Her gaze flickered briefly towards Chloe's hand. This beautiful lakefront property. She gestured vaguely towards the magnificent lodge behind them. Indeed, your entire anticipated financial future. Chloe stepped closer, her hand possessively gripping Richard's arm. What is it? She demanded, her voice sharp with suspicion. What are you talking about? Just required reading, Ellie explained pleasantly, for anyone planning a long-term future predicated on inheriting the Vance family estate. Seeing Richard still frozen, refusing to take the envelope, Ellie calmly broke the seal herself. She extracted the multi-page, notarized document, a certified excerpt from Arthur Vance's last will and testament. She held it up so both Richard and Chloe could see the official seals, the dense legal phrasing. You seem to have forgotten, Richard, Ellie began, her voice clear and steady now, projecting slightly so the intrigued onlookers could hear. Or perhaps, as your father suspected, you simply never bothered to read Article 7, Section B of his legally executed will, the one concerning the conditions attached to your inheritance. Richard's face was now completely white, his knuckles clenched at his sides. My father's will. This is nonsense! You have no right! Ellie began to read, her voice ringing with cold clarity in the stunned silence. Should my son, Richard Arthur Davies, initiate legal proceedings for the dissolution of his marriage to his wife, Eleanor Jenkins Davies, without legally demonstrable cause. She paused, looking directly at Richard. None of what is to be specifically defined herein is substantiated infidelity or willful abandonment by her. Then upon the final decree of said divorce, initiated by him under such circumstances, his entire designated portion of the inheritance outlined in this will. She let the words hang for dramatic effect, including but not limited to all shares in Vance Industries stock, the property known as Lakeside Manor in the Pocono Mountains, and all principal and interest contained within the Vance family trust designated for his benefit shall be declared forfeit. She looked up from the document, her gaze sweeping over Richard's horrified face, then Chloe's rapidly paling one. The clause further stipulates, she added helpfully, quoting from memory now, that the forfeited portion reverts entirely and irrevocably to the Vance Family Charitable Foundation, administered by the trustees, namely your father, Arthur Vance, and his designated successors. A collective gasp went through the surrounding guests. Chloe snatched the document from Ellie's hand, her eyes frantically scanning the dense text, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the paper. This is insane! She shrieked, looking wildly at Richard. It can't be legal! Arthur wouldn't... Tell her it's not legal, Richard! But Richard stood rooted to the spot, seemingly unable to move or speak, the full catastrophic implication of his father's foresight and his own arrogant oversight finally crashing down upon him. His carefully constructed world, the impending marriage, the secure financial future built on expected inheritance, was vaporizing before his eyes. My father, he finally whispered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. He would never do this to me. Oh, he did, Richard, Ellie replied quietly, retrieving the document from Chloe's trembling, unresisting fingers. He did it 6 years ago, because he saw who you were becoming long before I allowed myself to. He valued loyalty, integrity. Her gaze was steady, almost pitying, qualities you seem to have misplaced. The murmurings among the guests grew louder. Richard's managing partner pushed forward, his face grim. Davies, he said sharply, his voice low but carrying authority, is this document legitimate? Was your expected inheritance factored into your capital account projections with the firm? Other partners shifted uncomfortably, their expressions hardening, clearly calculating the professional fallout. Chloe finally seemed to comprehend the totality of the disaster. The luxurious future she had secured by attaching herself to Richard Davies vanished like smoke. Her face contorted with fury and disbelief. "You knew!" she screamed, whirling on Richard, forgetting the audience, forgetting everything but her own thwarted ambition. "You knew this could happen? You told me everything was secure. The house, the money, our future. Was it all just another one of your lies?" With a strangled cry of rage, she ripped the enormous diamond ring from her finger and hurled it, not towards the lake, as perhaps intended in her fury, but directly at Richard's chest. It struck him with a dull thud before falling unnoticed onto the flagstones. "I am not marrying into bankruptcy!" she shrieked, dissolving into hysterical sobs. Ellie watched the predictable implosion for another clinical moment, Richard sputtering denials towards his partners, ignoring Chloe's meltdown, guests whispering frantically or backing away discreetly. Her work here was done. The truth, delivered precisely, had detonated exactly as planned. "As I said," Ellie murmured, loud enough only for Richard to potentially hear over Chloe's wails. "Consequences." She gave him one last, long look. A look not of triumph, but of profound, weary finality. Then she turned and, with the same calm composure she had maintained throughout, walked steadily back through the stunned, parting crowd, away from the wreckage of the engagement party, away from the ruins of Richard Davies' future, towards her own quiet rental car, leaving the chaos to bloom fully in her wake. Ellie drove away from Lakeside Manor, leaving the smoldering wreckage of Richard's life behind her, feeling not triumphant, but profoundly weary, and strangely light. The confrontation hadn't brought the cathartic release she might have anticipated, but rather a quiet sense of grim closure. The truth was out. The consequences were in motion. Her part in the drama was done. She ignored the frantic buzzing of her phone, silencing it completely, needing only the quiet hum of the engine and the blur of the autumn landscape rushing past as she headed back towards Philadelphia, towards her own uncertain future. News of the disastrous engagement party and Richard's spectacular disinheritance spread through the tight-knit main line and Philadelphia's professional circles like wildfire. Whispers turned into gleeful gossip, then solidified into business page headlines. Vance patriarch disinherits son following divorce. Prominent architect Richard Davies faces partnership review amid scandal. Engagement ends in public implosion at Poconos Estate. Ellie learned indirectly, through concerned calls from Megan or awkward encounters with acquaintances, that Chloe Miller had indeed left Richard almost immediately after the party, vanishing from the social scene. Richard's prestigious architectural firm, deeply embarrassed and concerned about financial liability, formally requested he take an indefinite, immediate leave of absence pending an internal review. Arthur Vance's lawyers moved swiftly, sending official notifications to Richard, his attorneys, and in all relevant financial institutions, formally enacting the will's disinheritance clause based on the now finalized divorce initiated by him. The elegant Pocono Lake House, the symbol of the Vance legacy Richard cherished, went on the market within weeks. Ellie, meanwhile, focused entirely on her own quiet battle and rebuilding. She finished her final radiation treatments, enduring the debilitating fatigue with a newfound sense of purpose. She met regularly with her therapist, slowly unpacking the complex emotions of the past months, grief, anger, relief, and the unexpected strength she found in reclaiming her agency. She threw herself into consulting work with Eleanor Sterling's Arts Foundation, finding solace and purpose in using her skills for causes she believed in. She finalized the legal restorations of her maiden name. Eleanor Jenkins felt like putting on her own skin again after the years in an ill-fitting costume. She found a bright, airy apartment in Center City, Philadelphia, closer to her work and her supportive sister, leaving the large, empty mainline house and its ghosts behind without regret. Months passed. Winter yielded to a tentative spring. Ellie's energy returned, her health stabilized, and her oncologist, Dr. Chen, delivered the incredible news. She was officially in remission, no clean scans, excellent prognosis. That same week, she received a hesitant email from Richard requesting a meeting. He wanted to talk, he wrote, not to contest anything, but just to talk. After consulting with Megan and Arthur, who advised caution but supported her choice, Ellie agreed, choosing a quiet, neutral cafe downtown. He arrived looking diminished. The bespoke suit was still impeccable, but he seemed smaller somehow, the arrogant confidence replaced by a haggard weariness. The past few months had clearly taken their toll. loss of inheritance, professional suspension, public humiliation, abandonment by Chloe. He stumbled through awkward apologies, expressing regret not necessarily for the affair, but for the messiness of the situation, the unforeseen consequences. He spoke of his confusion, his anger at his father, his bewilderment at how everything had fallen apart so quickly. "I don't understand how it went so wrong, Ellie," he said, staring into his untouched coffee cup. I thought I had everything under control." It was then, looking at this man she had shared 15 years with, this man who still fundamentally didn't get it, that Ellie decided to share her final, most significant truth. "There's something you don't know, Richard," she began quietly. He looked up, wary. 3 weeks before, you sat me down in our library and told me you needed space. Dr. Chen diagnosed me with stage 2 breast cancer." His face went utterly blank with shock. "What? Cancer? But you never said—" "No," Ellie replied calmly. "I didn't. The night I tried to tell you something important was wrong, you were too busy with your Atherton presentation and the hospital gala. You told me I seemed stressed and needed to relax." She held his stunned gaze. "And when you delivered your speech about needing a clean break, I knew with absolute certainty that telling you then would have been pointless. My illness would have been just another inconvenience for you to manage, another burden deflecting from your plans with Chloe." She continued, her voice steady, devoid of accusation, simply stating facts. "So I signed your papers, and while you were celebrating your new engagement and planning parties at the lake house you thought was yours, I was undergoing surgery, then weeks of daily radiation therapy, alone. Or rather," she corrected herself, "with the help of my sister, and David Miller, and Arthur. Not my husband." Richard stared at her, genuinely speechless for perhaps the first time in his life, the full weight of his actions, his profound self-absorption and cruelty finally seeming to land. "Eleanor, I had no idea," he stammered, his face pale. "I know," Ellie said simply, "and that was the entire point. I needed to fight for my life, not fight you over a marriage you had already abandoned. Your choices just made my path clearer." The conversation provided no catharsis, no easy absolution, but it was a necessary reckoning, a final closing of the emotional ledger. Several months later, Arthur called. The Pocono house had sold quickly. He was overseeing the final clearing out and asked if Ellie wanted to come up one last time, retrieve some family photo albums George, Arthur's late father, Richard's grandfather, had stored there, along with some antique gardening tools that had belonged to Richard's grandmother, which Arthur knew Ellie cherished. Coincidentally, Richard would be there briefly that same weekend for his own final retrieval of personal effects. Ellie hesitated, then agreed. She drove up on a mild summer afternoon. The house felt different, emptier, echoing with ghosts. Richard was there, packing some old fly fishing gear. He looked calmer, humbled perhaps. He approached her quietly as she stood by the now bare mantelpiece. He held out a small, familiar velvet jeweler's box. "These were your mother's," he said gruffly, pressing it into her hand. Inside were the delicate pearl earrings Ellie had thought lost years ago. "I found them mixed in with some of Grandmother Vance's things. They belong with you." He cleared his throat. "I was a fool, Eleanor, about a great many things." It wasn't a full apology, not really, but it was an acknowledgement. They walked down to the dock together, sitting side by side in the Adirondack chairs, looking out at the water as the sun began to dip towards the mountains, much as they had done countless times over 15 years. They didn't rehash the past, didn't dissect the betrayal. They spoke quietly, almost impersonally, about the sale of the house, about Arthur's plans for the charitable foundation, about the changing seasons. A quiet, melancholy acknowledgement of what was lost, and an unspoken acceptance of their separate paths forward. Driving away from Lakeside Manor for the final time, the box of photo albums and her mother's earrings beside her, Ellie felt a profound sense of peace. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet strength. A year after the disastrous engagement party, Eleanor Jenkins was thriving. She was cancer-free, her health restored. Her consulting work with Eleanor Sterling's Arts Foundation had blossomed into a fulfilling second act, utilizing her skills for causes she believed in. Her new apartment felt like home, filled with light, art she loved, and the comfortable presence of friends, Megan, David Miller, Arthur Vance, who had truly become family. She reflected sometimes on the crucible of the past few years, the diagnosis, the divorce, the confrontation. They hadn't destroyed her. They had forged her. Richard's betrayal, however painful, had inadvertently liberated her, forcing her to reclaim her name, her career, her independence, her very self. The revenge delivered via Arthur's will felt less like a calculated strike now, and more like the inevitable consequence of Richard's own character flaws meeting Arthur's foresight. The true victory wasn't in Richard's downfall, but in her own quiet, resilient rebirth. Looking out her window at the Philadelphia skyline, she felt whole, strong, and finally, peacefully, at home in her own life,